welcome to the screen. My name is Thordis Elva, and I am the chair of the Nordic Digital Rights and Equality Foundation, which is one of several organizations that are behind the Game Changer project. One of the facets of the Game Changer project is the Nordic Digital Youth Embassy, and it is my honor and pleasure today to introduce Íris Þóra Birgisdóttir, who is the Digital Youth Ambassador of Iceland within the Game Changer project. The Game Changer project is co-funded by the Erasmus Plus program. And without further ado, I'm going to let Íris tell us everything she has learned in her research into the status of AI and its implementation into the Icelandic education system. Over to you, Íris Þóra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Íris, and this is my report on the AI implementation into the Icelandic education system. So, just a short introduction. Of course, as we all know, safe AI implementation into the education system is of paramount importance. So I did a bit of a deep dive into what's going on currently in the education system in Iceland, and I split my research into three. So the first sort of chapter was the why, the what, and the how. Why are we implementing AI into the education system? How is it being done, and what do we gain from it, or what are the risks? And then the second chapter is just an overview on just what's happening right now. And then the third one was kind of research on what can be done and what I would recommend to be done moving forward. So this is an overview of the status as of May 2026. Information was gathered through research, mostly through interviews of stakeholders such as government staff, teachers, students, and other people involved in AI implementation. So first big question is, why implement AI into the education system? So it's kind of risk versus reward. So the rewards include more individualized learning, eased workloads, better understanding of technology, but then the risks can be loss of critical and independent thinking skills, outsourcing of human intelligence, data and privacy breaches, and all sorts of other things that, you know, we all as a society are aware of. That AI has a ton of risks, but also many rewards. But the real question isn't, should we use AI? Or at least the Icelandic government has decided that that isn't the question. The question is more so, is how do we use it? And so how do we harness the good while mitigating the bad? Well, it's hard to answer that question because there is no real answer. And the Icelandic population has a lot of concerns and a lot of things that they want to see. So, for example, 44% of Icelanders believe that AI puts our democracy at risk. 52% are worried about its development. 75% want increased AI education. And that was a survey done by Netvís, the Safer Internet Center. The Icelandic Teachers Union also released a policy proposal for AI in schools, and the Reykjavik Youth Council also called for the creation of an AI policy in schools. So the people of Iceland definitely have opinions on the matter, which makes it an even more important task for the government to respond appropriately. So they have already responded with an AI action plan. It was originally made in 2024, but the newest version is meant for 2025 to 2027, although it will most likely be updated sooner. The chapter that I'm looking at is the chapter Menntun í takt við tímann, or Evolving Education. So that falls under the Ministry of Education and Children mostly, but also one part of it falls under the Ministry of Culture, Innovation and Higher Education, which that ministry also is responsible for the action plan itself. And the Directorate of Education and School Services are the ones that are kind of seeing it through. So the subsections of this chapter focus on AI tools in education, AI in teaching and learning, and increased AI and data literacy. So there are three subchapters within this chapter. The issue with the action plan as a whole, but also specifically this chapter, is that it doesn't properly encompass all the risks of AI, and it's kind of too superficial to properly provide structure to AI implementation and how to ensure AI safety and literacy. So, for example, they point to safe and humane AI, and they say in like the beginning intro chapter that they will be looking to international organizations such as the OECD for definitions on this. They do not point to any specific definition, and they also lack explanation that even though the OECD has one definition for humane, ethical, human-centric AI, then that's still disputed. That's not a one and done, here we go, this is what human-centric, humane AI is. We still have to work through these definitions. But the good thing is that the action plan is made to be updated, and it is already being updated. They're reviewing it currently. But the most important part of an action plan are the actions that are happening. And so because the subpoints are looking at using AI tools in education and how we use AI to teach and learn, there are already actions that have started directly in schools revolving those things. So that leads me to the kind of big chapter here, the bulk of my research, which is what is happening in Iceland currently. So the big project is the pilot project. So that is overseen by MMS, which is Miðstöð Menntunar og Skólaþjónustu, or the Directorate of Education that I mentioned earlier. They sent out essentially 2 teachers in Iceland the opportunity to take part in this project, and teachers had to sign up. And then it got split into 2. So it's grunnskóli, which is the lower level, it's elementary level, and then framhaldsskóli, which is a secondary school. And grunnskóli get Gemini, and framhaldsskóli get Claude. The reason why they got different ones is to be able to look at the differences between the 2, which one works better and what we gain from each one, but also partially because Gemini was already included in the grunnskóla sort of package that they have. So they figured they would just move on with that. This is thought not as a full implementation, but rather as just a stepping stone so that we can evaluate the impact of AI. So it's a very contained project. It has a lot of ramifications. There's a lot of safety protocols here, and it's all taken care of by MMS and by the AI companies. So that's Anthropic and Google. And this is a really interesting project because it's one of the first of its kind in the world, where a government gives its teachers, its government employees, access to these AI tools to use in their work. And really, they can use them however they want. And so this has actually gained international attention. I was told by MMS that they have gotten questions from other countries. They've gotten questions from international organizations about this pilot project. They didn't specify who or what, but it's a pretty big thing that such a small country can make such big waves with AI implementation. So how are things going? Everyone that I spoke to that is directly involved in the project, so teachers and government employees alike, they are all very happy about it. It's going very positively. They had a lot to say about how it helps them. So they said that one of the big things that it did for them is that it helped them not only use AI in the classroom, but also in the real world, because a lot of people are very hesitant about AI development and AI use. And so being able to have access to AI, because what they also get is access to AI education. And this is given to them by MMS, and it's given to them by the AI companies. So being able to understand the technology better made them a lot more confident and made them a lot more curious about what the opportunities are. And one of the good things about this project as well is that it helps create the standards that are needed to improve the action plan. So one of the reasons why the AI action plan is quite surface level is because we just don't really have much data to go off of. So this is one of the first things that will give us data to understand what we need to do moving forward. I spoke to project managers both on the elementary and secondary side. Both had very positive experiences, although the secondary project managers did say that they felt like secondary school was a bit of an afterthought compared to elementary, which was a shame to hear. But all in all, everyone was very happy about how things go, and everyone shared the same sentiment, is that they wanted to continue to learn how to use AI. And the University of Iceland also is conducting a study on this project. So the teachers involved kind of got 2 different surveys. First one was before they started, or right when they started, just about how much they know about AI, how would they use it, etc. And the second one is kind of just an update on, after all these months of using it, how did it go? What do you know now about AI? And the project itself for upper secondary, it started in November and it's ending now in summer, but with elementary, it started in February. It started a bit later because there were issues with Gemini. But anyway, the results of this study will be public this summer. So here are some things that the teachers were saying. These are things that I saw actually through the Facebook site that they had. They had like a Facebook group of all the teachers that were involved, and all of their meetings and everything. And some of the things that they were saying is that AI can be very helpful. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that it can do is ease workloads. It made for really fun projects and made AI less of a daunting thing to approach. When it comes to cheating, they kind of started talking about we have to rethink the way we approach assignments in class, have them be more collaborative, not just, take homework home and then bring it into class, because when you use AI, it's very easy to cheat that way. There was also talk about hypocrisy, that we don't want to be hypocrites, and that if we use AI, we also have to allow students to use it. But the big thing is just we have to teach them to use it responsibly. Equality of access was also a really interesting point that came up, and that the difference of access to AI and AI education can lead to inequality amongst students. So, for example, some AI tools are more expensive than others, and usually the most expensive tools are the better ones. So that can create a divide between students, the ones that can afford better AI and others that don't. And then also just between schools, the kind of approach that each school has to AI and the amount of AI education that each student is getting. It can lead to different outcomes, which is something that we have to have in mind. Of course, there's the sort of negative side, is that AI is an imperfect tool. The Icelandic was far from perfect. And it would sometimes, make up answers, say things that were completely wrong. And there was also a lot of talk about the way that there's not really a clear path forward following this project. A lot of teachers felt that that was really uncomfortable, that they didn't know what was coming next, and they wanted to know more about, what's going to happen with AI implementation, because there's no real information about that for them anyway. And then also another one that I found really interesting and important maybe to bring up here is that AI companies are profit-driven, and they may not necessarily have our best interests in mind. So we have to keep that in mind when we're using AI, and when AI companies are pushing us to use more and more and buy more and more. They are still companies that are profit-driven, and so we have to remember to hold on to our own autonomy here. I then spoke to students. I spoke to the Youth Council of Samfés. So it was a group of maybe about 20 children. They were aged 13 to 16. And they were not very happy about this pilot project. The thing is, they didn't even know what it was. When I asked them, what do you think about the pilot project? None of them had heard of it. None of them knew that that was even going on, that AI implementation into their education was even something that was happening. And when I explained it to them, they all got concerned, understandably, because they didn't know what was going on. As soon as I started explaining it to them, a lot of them started like warming up to it a bit. But it was very clear that the fact that they didn't know anything was very uncomfortable to them. But they were very interested in AI development and had all sorts of questions, all sorts of opinions that they wanted to share, because they had mixed experiences with AI as well, which I found was strange that they hadn't been asked, because they had received AI-generated projects. And in those projects, for example, the Icelandic wasn't very good. And nowhere were they able to give that criticism. Like they weren't able to post, like after they'd done the project, to say, I like this project because of this and this, but the Icelandic was bad, or this was weird, anything like that. with framhaldsskole, the upper secondary school, I actually spoke to students at FG, Framhaldsskólann í Garðabæ, Fjölbrautaskólann í Garðabæ, and I'd already spoken to 2 teachers there because they're the ones that are the project managers for the secondary level. So those kids actually knew a lot more about the pilot project because their teachers are the ones who are actually working on it. So they seemed a lot more relaxed, which is understandable because when you understand something, you're not going to be as worried about it. They knew about the risks, but one thing that I found was maybe a little bit, strange to hear is that the risks were almost normalized to them, not fully, like they were aware of the risks and wanted to mitigate them and, wanted to learn how to use AI responsibly. But it was really interesting that they said about, for example, data privacy and like privacy concerns. And they said, oh, well, does it really matter if AI is like stealing my data or, is using my personal data for something? Because I know that social media is already doing that. These things were completely normalized to them anyway, which was completely different than the elementary students because they're younger, they don't have as much experience online, and they also have stricter rules that they have to follow online. So they were very concerned about privacy and data usage. So that was a very interesting difference between the 2 levels. So on one hand, if you don't know anything about what's going on, it's going to make you more nervous. On the other hand, if you do know what's going on, it'll help you be more relaxed and open about it. But also, you don't want it to go too far where people just, normalize risks and think, well, whatever, we can just allow AI to use my personal data because I know it's already being used, which is a fair point because it already is. But that's something I think that governments should definitely have in mind. So another factor that's going on in Iceland right now is, of course, AI literacy and just AI education in general. Because if we're going to implement AI into the education system, we have to educate people on AI and make people AI literate. So I spoke with Netris, which is the Icelandic Safer Internet Center, and they are actually offering AI education. But there were all sorts of problems that were occurring for them, mostly just the fact that they didn't really have the resources because it's a really big project, right, to offer everyone AI education and to help people become more AI literate, because it's not just the students, it's also teachers, it's also parents. And they found that when they spoke to people, all sorts of people, students, teachers, parents, people generally think that they understand AI a lot better than they actually do. But because they don't really have resources, they don't have necessarily enough funding, that meant that they weren't able to really go all in like they would want to. And also they can't really do research. There's not really any research done on AI literacy in Iceland and AI usage in schools. And so there isn't really in general like a comprehensive AI education throughout schools in Iceland, and no real effort to improve AI literacy, at least so far. And so from talking to students, I found that they are already feeling the effects of this lack of a nationwide strategy. So even though in the elementary schools, AI has been made part of the curriculum, there's no real strategy to ensure that everyone in all schools receives a similar education. And when I spoke to the children in elementary schools, the difference between the way their schools were handling AI was astounding, honestly, because some of them were told to use AI without any proper instruction, and they felt it was really uncomfortable because they didn't really know what they were doing, and they were afraid that they were just going to use AI for everything now, and they didn't know how they were really using it, and they would lose their critical and independent thinking. And on the other hand, other students were being told that if they used AI, their computer would be taken off them, and it was, completely banned. And they were really afraid as well because they wanted to understand AI. Not that they want to be able to use it for every single project or to cheat or whatever. They just wanted to know how this technology works. But the school didn't even allow them to talk about it. It was just completely out of the question. And it was kind of, made into this really scary thing rather than something that we can speak honestly about and understand. So because there's no nationwide strategy, we got schools that are completely opposite end of the spectrum and kids that come out with completely different, really, educations on AI. So, of course, there's also a million other things happening just independently here and there in towns and schools. MMS is creating more AI tools, mostly for teachers. So they're doing like a database for teachers that is AI powered. As I said earlier, the AI action plan is under review and the Evolving Education chapter is being expanded on currently. And when I spoke to the ministries, both of education and children and of higher education, innovation, and culture, and I asked them what the ministers were saying about AI, they said that there's really one instruction when it comes to AI, and that is just go. Go for it, go. And so then the real question becomes, how do we ensure safe AI implementation? So beyond just the Icelandic government itself, smaller institutions such as towns and schools also have responsibility. And it is important that they hold on to a certain level of autonomy because different circumstances lead to different needs. So a school that's elementary is going to need completely different AI education than a school that's secondary, or one town that's, you vote in your politicians, your town politicians. One town may vote in for a specific policy and another town for something slightly different. So those towns have to also be able to hold on to those specificities. But of course, everyone has the common goal of reaping AI benefits while mitigating risk. But the issue is that we don't really have any real path to ensure this. And that's where the Department of Education comes in with the Evolving Education chapter. And so they are expanding on it. There's a sprint upcoming, which is like an 8-week effort to create a comprehensive policy on AI in education. And in this, they should include things like clear ethical AI definitions. How do we mitigate the risks? How will ethical AI take place? And then once that is kind of all firmly laid down, we can look at more specific aspects such as what kind of AI we should be using, what kind of research we should be doing on AI, etc. So the main blind spots that I found while doing this research is that the AI action plan, of course, is just completely lacking detail. It's not comprehensive enough to tackle all the many issues that are involved in AI implementation. But of course, this is being worked on, but I think the sooner the better. We really need it to be updated sooner, and we need real definitions for how we approach AI, AI safety, ethical AI, and ethical AI implementation. Then the other big thing was, of course, funding. A lack of funding is leading to stagnation or slow development. As I mentioned with AI education, Thordis, for example, has had a hard time really going all in because they just haven't had the resources. But the same thing can be found in government ministries as well. AI specialists in the ministries were only appointed fairly recently, and there really aren't many of them at all. And when I spoke to government employees, they all shared the same sentiment that they feel like they need more people, they need more time, more backing. MMS as well said that they had run out of funds. The only reason why they were able to do the pilot project is because they had funding that had piled up for a while for digital development, and they just decided to go for it with AI. But now they're basically just waiting on the minister to write the next check and give them funding. But up until then, it's all going to be kind of in limbo. AI literacy, and this all comes back to funding, of course, as well, but AI literacy levels are low, and there's no clear plan to improve this, which also would need a lot more staff and a lot more funding. And one of the biggest issues that I came across was the complete lack of student involvement. Students had all sorts of concerns, all sorts of opinions, and this was just overlooked completely throughout this entire project, and throughout just the implementation itself. The whole focus has been on teachers, which is fantastic. I think teachers' opinions and experiences should 100% get the focus that they've gotten, but not at the expense of students. I do not understand why students have not been consulted, because they haven't at all. And I could tell when I spoke to the youth council, they had not been spoken to about this at all, not been asked any opinions, especially when you're given an AI generated project. The fact that you don't even get to express your thoughts on what could have been done better, or you weren't even told why it is that you're now suddenly getting an AI powered project. I think that is just unacceptable. Truly, I think students should be 100% more involved, and education at the end of the day revolves around students, and so they should be the center of this. So what do we do? How do we make this better? These are my recommendations. So firstly, of course, education. It is the #1 most important factor in ensuring ethical AI implementation. We have to make clear our criteria for AI literacy and create a strategy to guarantee it. And so students, teachers, government officials, parents, everyone should receive AI education, and everyone should receive equal access to AI education. A new curriculum for the framhaldsskole, the secondary schools, is also needed, because theirs does not involve AI education. And as I said, elementary does include AI, but it's kind of more so in passing. There's no real plan to improve AI education or AI literacy. And so, of course, more funding is needed for this. The second part is cohesion. We need a lot better coordination between ministries and other on-the-ground organizations. I found that when I was speaking to ministries, I think partially because there just weren't that many people working on this big thing, like so few people working on such a big project, it ends up with people kind of just bouncing between here and there. And when I asked them, what would you like to see? And they all said, we just need more people. We would like to see more and better focus. And so that also obviously ties in with funding as well, so that people who are in the ministries and also people who are on the ground can have a better sort of network of specialists. So really this also comes back to staying on top of progress, because if we don't stay on top of how AI is progressing, how can we implement it safely? And so we need better communication within our government amongst specialists. We need more specialists, and coordinate better around this massive project that is happening. And then I also found that there's just not enough transparency. So just in general, when you Google what's happening in Iceland with AI implementation in the education system, you get little to nothing. There is this new website called Staða Gervigreindar, or the status of AI, which they don't have anything on AI in education yet, but they have, like, on their website, they say that they want to update it to also include that, which will be fantastic. That will be like a huge step in the right direction. But as of currently, there's no, or very, very limited public information about where we are with the status of AI implementation in the education system. But coming back to this issue of students not being involved, is that there just is no transparency for students. We have to place more emphasis on student standpoints to reduce fear and ensure trust, because if we don't focus on them, then we risk things just completely going out of hand, and we won't have control over the students anymore, their AI use, or the way that they view AI, because we also don't want them to be afraid or anxious. We want them to understand. and we need to be open and honest with them about what AI is, how are we using it, why are we using it, and that is just something that is just completely lacking in my humble opinion. So, final words. The ministers declined to speak to me, so that's both the Minister of Education and Children, who cited that she just didn't have time, but then there's also the Minister of Higher Education, Culture and Innovation, who declined because he felt like this was not something he could speak on, or not necessarily his responsibility, which does slightly come back to what I was talking about earlier with cohesion, and that there isn't enough cohesion amongst the ministries, because AI does fall under the Ministry of Culture, Education, and Higher Education and Innovation. So there is something there that maybe has to be straightened out a little bit. But really the issue is that my generation, and the ones, of course, coming after me, our opinions and concerns are completely vital moving forward, because AI affects us the most. And older generations, especially those in power, need to listen to us, because you can't move forward without our opinions, without our help, because we understand AI in a completely different way. It affects us in a completely different way. And so how are you going to lead a ethical AI implementation if you don't involve youths and the younger generations? And because there's a complete lack of cross-generational dialogue here, that we have to allow youths to be part of the conversation and do better there, both with people like me who are, slightly older, but have important things to add into the conversation, but also, of course, as I have mentioned, students themselves. And I think that the Icelandic government can do a lot more to involve us, and also just make clear where they stand in terms of AI implementation and how it will affect us. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Íris, for this fascinating and deeply informative presentation of where we stand as a country when it comes to the implementation of AI. I want to say that I think it's sad that both of these ministers declined to meet with you, and I think it's their loss. But can I inquire on behalf of anyone watching this, what is it that you would have wanted to tell them had they accepted your meeting?
Well, I had maybe slightly different things to say to each one, because they have different
Sure.
specialties. In general, I would have wanted to tell them to, as I just said, to allow youth to be part of the conversation more, because that's why I wanted to speak with them in the first place, because I had noticed a lack of youth involvement. And then, of course, I wasn't even allowed to be involved even after reaching out to them. And I did emphasize this point of, as people in power, you have a duty to listen to all groups of people. But still, both declined to see me. But when it came to the Minister of Culture, Innovation, and Higher Education, I wanted to focus more on just the general impacts of AI and the way it can impact the school system, ethical AI, and the importance of the ethical implementation of AI. And with the Minister of Education and Children, I wanted to talk about its specific effects on children.
Mm-hmm.
So slightly different things, but very much in the same sphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to take back something I said earlier, which was that it was their loss not to meet with you, but it is a societal loss when there's no intergenerational conversation going on about something that is going to deeply impact the future for all of us. Then that is a loss for everyone. So thank you so much. It is not just for doing this study so well, this report research, if you will, doing it so well, but also for reaching out and doing what you can as a young person deeply invested in this pressing matter, and educating all of us in the meanwhile. Deeply impressive. Thank you so much, Íris. And that concludes your role as the Digital Youth Ambassador of Iceland. And I think we'll make those our concluding words. Thank you so much, everyone who watched, and stay tuned.